in the tunnel. And it's important because of the understanding the cities and what that means and how that affects your consciousness. Many people think that cities is a Hindu word, and it kind of means abilities or powers that are sometimes considered superhuman, but they're not really superhuman. It's just things that it's just the limitations that we place on ourselves, we drop, and when we do, we can do things that we normally couldn't think as possible. And many of the initiations in the very, very, very beginning have to do with the understanding of the cities. And to begin to go up, you first must go down. This, which I'll come to again and again when I talked about the labyrinth that went from 3, 2, 1, all the way to the bottom, then went into the heart at 4, then 7, 6, 5. And so the initiation in the Great Pyramid, and many of you have been through this initiation, begins not in the King's Chamber, up in the lofty areas of the King's Chamber, but way, 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 way down underneath the Great Pyramid, way down in that little room called the Well. Some people call that room the Pit, but that's not really the Pit. The Pit is that other little room with that block that's sitting on there. That's the Pit. Now, the Well is the one with the well in it. And it kind of began for me on November 1st of 1984. I have to think for a moment. I actually haven't told this story for a long time. I now remember. I had to rerun the tape. I was sitting in meditation, and the angels came into me, and they said, very simply, this is how they do it all the time. They just come in and say, bloop, bloop, and walk away. And I'm always going, what's bloop, bloop mean? And this time they said, you have to read the Emerald Tablets. And I said, what's that? And they said, you'll find out. And they left. And so I'm scratching my head going, Emerald Tablets? I'd never heard of the Emerald Tablets. I didn't have any conscious knowledge of the Emerald Tablets. And so I went down to a bookstore to figure out if it was a book or what the heck it was. I didn't know if it was tablets or book. I thought it probably was the name of a book or something. I went in the bookstore and no one knew what I was talking about. You couldn't buy the Emerald Tablets. They weren't for sale. And so I didn't know how to proceed. But I did have a good friendship with crystals, and to me they were alive. And I figured, well, they're the Emerald Tablets, so maybe they're emerald. And no more did I think that thought than a friend came up and handed me an emerald crystal. It was only about like a day or so later. This real good friend of mine, Jenny Bird, who's a singer out of town, she comes up and she gives me a little emerald, uncut emerald crystal. She goes, here, thought you might like this. And I looked at the little crystal and said, well, I got a piece of emerald now. And I went down and I sat down where I do my meditation. And I went into meditation. And I've learned how to connect and communicate with them. And I said to it, what do you know about the Emerald Tablets? And the little emerald in my hand just started chanting, the Emerald Tablets are not made out of emerald. Over and over and over again. And after about 10 minutes, I figured, all right. And I gave it back to Jenny. I think it was a broken record, kind of. And so I said, well, my first piece of information, the Emerald Tablets are not made out of emerald. I then was attracted to a chrysoprase crystal, and I asked the little chrysoprase crystal, well, what do you know about the Emerald Tablets? And it went on and on and on, giving me all this technical data. it said that the emerald tablets was one of the hardest substances in the universe, and it was made through thought, and that I don't remember all the stuff. It just kept telling me all this stuff, and so I tried to remember as much as I could about all this stuff, but it didn't seem to really tell me anything about the heart of what the emerald, what it was about, except that it was these tablets. And so at that point, I put the crystal phase crystal down. And then a few days later, and all this took place, by the way, just so you know the time span here, it took place from November 1st, 1984 to January 19th, 1985. So we're, a couple months or more. Is that right? A little more, almost 3 months. And a few days later, I was in a little place called El Prado, New Mexico, picking up my mail at that time. And this woman drives up in this car, and I hadn't seen her in a long time, at least a year or more. Hadn't seen her. So I went up and said, "Hi, how you doing?" Just talking. And I was standing outside of her car, and she was in the car. And at one point, just out of the blue, she just reaches over to her car seat and she says, "Have you ever read these things?" She hands this up to me and goes, "The Emerald Tablets." And I was just like, wow. And I said, "No." I said, "Where'd you get those things?" She says, "I don't know." She says, "Someone gave them to me." She says, "They're really interesting." I said, "Well, can I borrow them?" And I got the tablets and I went home and I started reading the tablets. I got somewhere to about it's been so long since I've read them now. I've read them 6 times, but I don't remember which key it is, or which tablet it is in there, but it was somewhere about the 4th one or so. It says, first of all, it says the person who did this was a man named Thoth, who wrote the Emerald Tablets. Well, I didn't know who Thoth was. I knew, intellectually that he was the scribe out of Egypt and stuff like that, but other than that, I didn't have any contact with him as far as I knew. And so my mind just went over to Egypt and scanned around a little bit and came back. So hard to be down here. Let's see, where was I anyway? I got to stay centered when I tell these things and not go skinny. Oh yeah, okay, I got it. 4th key, and he told me in the 4th key it says, if you want to contact me, to repeat my name 3 times. It said that he was from Atlantis, and you had to repeat his Atlantean name. His Atlantean name is pronounced Chikutet Arlich Vomalites. So I had to say this 3 times and wait. So I sat down, and I sat in meditation for a long time until one thing I realized that it said it was written on 100 levels, and I understood that there was probably many connotations and understandings that were not exactly in print. And so when it said to repeat the words 3 times, I knew that it didn't mean just go to a wall and repeat it 3 times, but to go deeply into meditation and wait until you're centered and then to do this. And so I sat down and I went deep into my meditation, and I waited for a long time until I felt very centered and connected in that way. And I repeated his name 3 times, and I had my eyes closed, expecting to have an internal experience with whoever this person Thoth was. So I said his name 3 times, and I waited. And nothing happened. And I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. Somewhere like 15 or 20 minutes later, I'm still sitting here waiting for something to happen, and there was nothing happening. So in my little head I said, well, either I guess I'm not ready for this right now. And so I opened my eyes, fully expecting to get up and just do something else. And when I opened my eyes to get up, sitting in front of me, about maybe 5 feet or 4 feet in front of me, was an object that I did not expect to see, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. It was a huge egg, about 4 feet high and about this big around, and it was made out of this gold shimmering light. And it was translucent. You can see through it. But it was really there. It was just really there. And the more I focused on it, the more real it became. Until as I just kept watching it, and like pretty soon I've really got this gold egg in my room. And I'd completely forgotten now, at this moment, anything about Thoth or Chikadip. I was so involved with this egg, trying to figure out what this was, and was I going nuts, or what was happening here. You know, I was just sitting there looking at this thing and everything else like that. And I'm sitting there looking at this thing, and I must have watched it for several minutes as it started to become more real, when suddenly I was kind of looking around like this, when suddenly my back went really straight. And I didn't do it. And I'm going, what's this? You know, I was like, my back, something just made my back go really straight. And the next thing happened, my arms went up like this. And I'm going, what's this? And pretty soon I find myself doing this. I go, oh God, I've had a rough day. And I trying to figure out, why am I doing this? What is this egg, and what is happening to me? And so every time my head would go from there and scan over to where I can see the egg, I was trying to get my eyes and watching what was going on with this egg, because I knew that egg had something to do with this. And the egg started becoming less and less transparent, and I could see that there was somebody in the egg doing the same thing, only when I was here, he was over there. It was like a 90-degree turn. We were doing like back and forth like that. And after a few minutes of doing this, the golden shimmering egg disappeared, and there's a little old man sitting in my room. And I recognized him. I knew who he was. He was the guy from a long time ago. Remember my alchemist teacher, where that disappeared and this little old man reappeared in there? It was him. And in my heart, I kind of went, oh boy, you know? It's like, you know, I really love this guy, and I really wanted him. I always wanted him to come back. And there was a part of me that felt really connected to him, and I was so glad to see him. And so I started communicating with him telepathically, but he wouldn't talk to me. He just sat there and looked. And so after a little bit, I kind of, well, okay. And I sat there and just looked back, because I didn't know what else to do. And he looked at me for a while. I don't know how long. It's really hard to say when you're looking at someone like this how long time went by, but a certain length of time went by, maybe it was 10 minutes or something. And then, without ever saying a word to me, not even saying hello, nothing, the egg shimmering thing appeared around him, and then it just disappeared, and there was nothing there. It was gone. I didn't know what it was about. I felt really happy after he gone, though, because I realized then that it was probably the next teacher I was going to have, since it was brought in through my angels telling me to connect with the Emerald Tablets. That's why I felt I had permission to do this thing. And I was real excited. I could feel that life was going to start getting very interesting very soon. And soon after that, I went out and happened to be going through a large tray of crystals. There's hundreds of crystals in this tray. They were all quartz crystals, I was going through this tray, and suddenly like this one crystal was just like popped out. It was different than all the rest of them. And I reached over and picked up this crystal, and it was so unique. There was something about it. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It was a twined crystal. You know, like when two crystals are connected. A twined crystal is when the crystal throws out its little cubical band before it starts spinning around that I talked about. One of the cubes gets kind of bumped, and another crystal comes out of that one. So it's really one crystal that comes out with two. And I see this crystal, and I was just like, I don't know what this crystal is, but it was very powerful for me. So I took it home, and I sat down in my little place, and I put the little crystal in my hand, and I said, what do you know about the emerald tablets? And I had an experience with this crystal. I've had lots of experience with crystals. All kinds of amazing things have happened in my life around crystals. But this crystal gave me the most incredible visual experience that I've ever had with any crystal ever. I'm not going to get into real great depth over this because I don't think it's really pertinent to this story exactly what happened. I'll just very lightly tell you about it. But I went into a deep meditation with this crystal, and the crystal told me to look into one of the faces that I felt it. I opened my eyes and looked into this face of this crystal, and almost immediately this deep male voice began to speak, and it sounded like it was coming out around my head or out here. And the first thing that was said was, "My name is Akhenaten. My name is Akhenaten." I know now that that is Akhenaten, and probably how his name was really pronounced. And he talked to me for a while, and I don't remember exactly what he said on that, and he told me to look inside the face and look deep into it, and I would find a point of light. So I looked way, way in there, and this little point of light flashed. And he said, just look deep into that point. And I started looking into this point, and it just started glowing, and it started moving toward me. And all of a sudden, I felt more like I was in space, and this point of light was coming very fast, like a star moving very, very fast at me. And pretty soon it looked like it was really coming at me. And as it started approaching faster, I could see that it was a geometrical image of light. And then it came like it was going to hit me, and it went right past me. And right behind it, not very far away, was another one. And it went like that. And then another one, giving me just enough time to recognize the form, and then right past me. And this went on for a very long time. I'd say maybe an hour and a half or something. I was just sitting there with this crystal going, and I don't know what it was. I don't know it's like they were geometrical. I felt their essence, but I don't know what was being told to me in this. And when it finally stopped, the male voice came in again and told me to turn the crystal a certain number of degrees, and my body just did it. And when I did, sitting in front of me was a perfect octagonal face, just like a stop sign. I have never in all my life seen an octagonal face in a crystal. I've seen 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided, 6-sided, 7-sided, and 9-sided. But I've never seen an 8-sided one. And so I was going, wow. And it was perfect. It was like somebody made it with a machine. It was so perfect. And I looked into that one, and almost immediately this real soft, beautiful female voice came out and said, "My name is Nefertiti. Please follow me." And And I looked deeply into the crystal, and an expansion feeling began again. And as it grew, I felt myself in Egypt on the desert. And I looked open, and I could see the 3 pyramids. And the sun was just rising up over the top. And I felt myself begin to fly. I flew over the top of the pyramids, and Nefertiti was like beside me. And we began doing this flying thing, flying through temples, right? Like flying through them. I have no idea what was going on. I'm just witnessing this thing. When I came back, the last thing I remember is I was looking into the Great Pyramid. The sun was setting, and the Sphinx was in the pyramid looking out. Came back into the room, and here's this little crystal in my hand. And I'm going, what the heck was that? You know, it's like suddenly all these unusual experiences, which I hadn't experienced for years. For many, many years, nothing like this had occurred. Though there was a long period of my life where I had, when the angels first came in, I had lots of stuff like this happening. But suddenly, this was brand new. That night, or the next day, or the day after that, very soon in there, I had a dream. And the dream was full 3D color, just like reality. It was a very, very real dream. It was a dream where I found myself with a small circle of people, and we were heading to Egypt. And once we got there, we did this initiation all over, going through these temples all over Egypt. And then the dream seemed to go out of phase for a moment, and then it came back into this absolute clarity again. Only I wasn't in Egypt anymore. I was somewhere else. I didn't know where I was. And I remember at one point saying, "Where am I?" And I get this answer, "You're in Peru." And because there's pyramids all over. And I found myself going all over Peru and all over the place doing this same thing, going to these temples and doing this initiation. And it seemed to go out of phase again. It came back into this clarity again. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm going all over some kind of jungle with doing this. And then I realized I was in the Yucatan. And when I woke up the next morning, I could remember this dream like really well. And all day long I'm thinking about this. What does this mean? What is this dream? What is this crystal thing I did? What is happening? What is going on in my life? This is where is this leading? I was, I wasn't. There was no fear here at all. I was just wanting to know. The little child inside of me was really excited, and the bigger child inside of me was going, "Well, what's going on? What's happening?" And then the next thing that happened after that was I decided to connect with Thoth again. And so I sat down and I repeated his name 3 times. And this time I left my eyes open. And sure enough, bingo, here we go, this thing again. And then there he is, sitting on my bed. Only this time he would talk to me and telepathically communicating. One thing about Thoth, he doesn't beat around the bush. There's none of this, "Hi, how you doing? What's going on?" He just says, "The dream you had last night will happen if it begins." And only when he said the dream, see, it's more than just words. There was a whole body of feelings and understanding would come with each word. So I knew that it was an initiation. I knew all those other things. But I didn't quite understand what he meant by "if it happens." And then he clarified and he said, "You can't do anything to make it happen. You're to keep this secret unto yourself. You're not to buy a ticket or do anything to get over there. You're not to tell anyone. You're not to anything. You're just supposed to somehow end up in Egypt. And if you do, then it will all begin and this initiation process will begin." And then he left. And then after he left, I was thinking about this. When I was saying, "Well, this is an easy one. I mean, I don't have to do anything. I just sit here and somehow I'm going to end up in Egypt. I had all these fantasies about somebody coming and kidnapping me. I started to figure out, how could I possibly get it to Egypt without doing a thing? I take an airline and I get hijacked and end up in Egypt. I was going through all this stuff. I couldn't figure it out. I figured, well, I'll just leave it up to God. I'm sure it'll happen if it's supposed to happen, though my little mind couldn't conceive of a way that it could possibly happen. And so, right after that, I had promised my parents I'd go see them. And so I went in to see them for 10 days. And and on the 10th day, the 9th day, after 9 days, my sister Nita returned from China. I hadn't seen her for maybe a year. My sister's always traveling, all the time. She is a I don't know, a travel addict, I guess. She has been traveling for 40, 45 years, for 10, 11 months out of every year, constantly. She's been in every country on the planet, I'm sure. She's been in every city like 10, 15, 20, 30, 35 times. She's been to Egypt, I think, 22 times. She's been everywhere. That's all she does. She just keeps moving. And I remember one time, she had a map. One time she used to be into putting a pen every time she'd go to a new place. She had a map of the world, and it was like you couldn't even see the globe. It was just like all these pins all over it. She sat at a party one time with this guy who was also a super world traveler, and they had a contest to see if they could find one place that the other one hadn't been. They went on for over 2 hours. Well, have you been here? Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, on and on and on. And finally, they were slowly going over the whole planet trying to find somewhere, and so they were going down the Amazon. They're going, okay, you go down the Amazon, you go down here, and you remember this place? Yeah, sure. They go over there, they go down here and here, and there's this place with the Amazon lies somewhere. And he says, okay, you go down the one on the right. And he goes, yeah. And he says, what about the one to the left? Found out that she had gone down some channel somewhere to some strange place that he had not been to. And it was like, I sat and watched this for an hour because it was so incredible. Anyway, she was just getting back from China, and I hadn't seen her for a long time, so I decided to break off one day from my parents and go see her. And we sat down about 10 o'clock, and we really loved each other, and I gave her a big hug, and I was really glad to see her. She's a 13th degree Rosicrucian, if you know what that means. And it's really a big part of her life. And so she's into spiritual matters as much as I am. And so we sat down and we talked about things like that and traveling and all kinds of things. And but I didn't tell her anything about this thing with Thoth. I was told not to say a word. And then late in the evening, it was 1:30, something like that, we were sitting over this coffee table, and on the coffee table was this big book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And she was talking about one thing, and she just casually reached over and just flipped the book. And it flips open to the Great Pyramid, cross-section of the Great Pyramid. And the conversation gets switched to Egypt. And she starts talking about Egypt, one of her experiences over there. And suddenly she looks me in the eye and she says, "You've never been to Egypt, have you?" And I go, "No, never been there." She goes, "Well, if you ever want to go, let me know, and I'll take you, and I'll pay for everything. I'll do it all for you. I want to do this just for you." She says, "Whenever you want to go to Egypt, just let me know." And I just kind of held my lips because I knew that I was not to say anything. And so I didn't say a word, and I went back home. I get back home, I put my clothes down and I sit down to do my meditation. I no sooner just sit down, and I barely sit her, and poof, none of this stuff, none of the egg, nothing, poof, there's Thoth in my room sitting in front of me, cross-legged with me. And he looks at me and he just says, "That's how you're going to Egypt." And I knew, when he said that's how, I knew exactly what he meant, that with my sister. and I said, okay. And he says, "You're to call your sister the very first thing tomorrow morning and tell her that you want to go, and that you want to go between January 10th and January 19th. There is no other time that you can go. That's the only period." He says there's a window that opens up at that time where many of the pyramids and the temples in Egypt are activated, and they don't work at any other time. So he leaves. The next morning, I knew I had to do this, and I went over the telephone. I started to pick it up, and I put it back down, and I started thinking about this, and I started feeling really funny, because when my sister said, "I'll take you to Egypt," what she really meant was, someday down the line, I'll take you to Egypt. This was like the middle of December, so we're talking about a month away, or maybe less. And I felt like this was like imposing, like I didn't feel quite right to do this. Oh, thanks, Terry. Great. And anyway, I knew I had to follow my higher guidance. But I must have sat there for half an hour getting the courage to do it. And finally I got the courage. I picked the phone up and dialed it. Got my sister, and I said, because this is like the next day, this is like 24 hours later. And I said, "Well, remember when you said you would take me to Egypt?" She goes, "Yes." And I says, "Well, I really need to go, and I need to go right away. And I'd like to go between January 10th and January 19th. And my sister was quiet for a moment. She goes, "I can't do that." And which is what I expected her to tell me. I mean, she had bought she traveled so much, she bought a travel agency. And she had the largest travel agency in all of California. And and she, I knew she was booked ahead. She says, "I have every single day of my life booked in solid all the way into September of 1985. And she says, "I would love to take you, and I will take you, but it's going to have to be after that time." And I said, "Well, okay." I thought I would ask. And she says, "I will go back to my office and look at my schedule and see exactly." She says, "I don't really know what I'm doing from minute to minute, but I'll go back and look, and I'll call you back in about an hour, and we'll talk about it." I says, "Okay." So I hang up the phone. An hour later, she calls me back, and she goes, "This is pretty good, Drunvalo." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, she says, "I'm not only booked into September, I'm now booked into almost to the end of October, solid every single day, except for between January 10th and January 19th, it's blank." She says, "There's not even a scribble in it. It's just blank." And she says to me, "I think we're really supposed to do this." I says, "No kidding." I do too. And I says, "I'm really glad that it hooked together and connected, because I would really want to do this with you, and soon I'll be able to explain everything to you." And that afternoon or the next day, she called the travel agency, it was TWA Airlines, to get a ticket. And she happened to be the one that brings, or used to for a long time, bring the ARE groups to Egypt. And she would bring like 700, 800, 900 people at a time over there. And so she calls up and she says, I need a ticket for myself and my brother. 2 tickets. And they said, and the guy, whoever's on the other end, said, this is just for you and your brother? And she goes, yes. She says, we'll pay for it. So TWA paid for all our way over, everything, all the food, the whole number. And we got a free ticket going over and back. And so the way was definitely paved for our way over there and back. And and so the energy was now set, and this whole thing was to happen. Thoth then came in and began to come in almost every day then, and said that I had to go through a training before we could go. That there were certain things that I had to understand and learn before we attempted this, otherwise it wouldn't work. He explained to me that the final place that we were going to go into would be a 4th dimensional space, and that whatever I thought and whatever I felt would happen, and that I had to be prepared to work with fear. And so he gave me this training where I would imagine these blue these neon rings around my body. It would be about this big around. And these series of rings that whenever I felt fear, I would see if it was paranoia or if it was real. And there was a certain way I could move the rings to determine that. And that if it was paranoia, then there was a certain pattern I would move the rings which would make all the fear go away. If it was real, there was another pattern I would put up which would give me protection. And so I went through that training, and which was real important, I guess. And then there was another thing. He said that in order to do this thing, I had to go to certain temples in a very precise order. And that if I were to break this order in any way, then he says I might as well go home because it's done. Forget it. And so he gave me an itinerary of exactly all the various places I had to go. And it started with Luxor. In Luxor, the Temple of Man, us, is where I had to go first. And then to the Temple of Dreams. And then to the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And then they kept going through this whole series of places that we had to go to, one after another, which finally terminated on the last day to the Great Pyramid in this tunnel way underneath there. And that was the last place that I had to go. He then he said that I couldn't, not only did I have to go to these places in order, but in order to make them turn on or work, I had to pronounce certain sounds with my voice, and that these sounds were Atlantean words, and I had to learn Atlantean. And so for a period of time, I don't know how long it was, a week or so, he would come in and he would have me learn phrases. They were like a paragraph of these sounds, and I'd have to learn how to pronounce them. And he was a real stickler on this. I would say a word and he'd go, no, say it again, say it again, say it again. He'd have me pronounce it until I got it just the way that he wanted it. And then when I would get it just that way, he would have me write it in English phonetically to the best of my ability. And then, so I'd go word by word by word by word through these phases. He would tell me what each one of them meant, so I knew what I was saying. And then when I got them all done, I'd have to practice for him until I got it just the way that he wanted it. That was one of the things that was going on before I went over there. A feeling that went through my body was that the emerald tablets. Oh, there's another thing that happened. I forgot. When I got back, it wasn't a friend of mine, Sananda Ra, who was the husband of Katrina Raphael at that time. We were real good friends. We used to travel a lot together. And he found out I was going to Egypt, and he'd never been there, and he came up and he says he wanted to come. So I got permission from my inner guides, and yes, he can come. And so we went from 2 to 3. Then Sananda had a brand new girlfriend that he wanted to bring with him. And she was a Sikh out of Yogi Bhajan's order. And she had just dropped out of the order. She was still wearing the white turbans and everything, but she had just dropped out. And she was just changing her name, and that was Katrina Raphael. So I'd never met her. She hadn't written her books or anything on those kind of stuff yet. And then later, Sananda wanted to add another person, his brother, Jake. So as it turned out, there were 5 of us that ended up in this little circle to go over there. As I was studying and doing this work with Thoth, just as I finished this work with Thoth, the angels came at one point and said, "You are going to go on a trip for 3 days. Be prepared and pack." And then they left. And they forgot to tell me where I was going, which is, it was the middle of December, and it could have been anywhere on the planet. And so I had to pack for every conceivable place you could think of. I didn't know if I was going to the Bahamas or to the North Pole, so I had this big glop of stuff from down jackets to swimming shorts, in this thing. They go, well, I can go anywhere with this baby. I don't know where I'm going. But I had it all packed up and ready to go, and I was wondering, well, I wonder where I'm going. And I no sooner had it packed up than Sananda pulls up, and he just bought this brand new white Jeep. And he pulls up and he says, "Hey, Drunvalo, he says, I got to go to Tucson, Arizona for 3 days. You want to come?" So I just turned around, picked up this bag, and said, "Yep." Threw it in the back of his car and said, "Let's go." And he knew I was nuts anyway, so he didn't even ask, I don't think. And we got in the car, went over to his house, packed, and left. This is the story that Don would like me to tell, though I don't think I'm going to tell it now because it's about an hour-long story. What happened to us was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We went, on the 3rd dimension, we went 4th dimensional. Things began to happen that were impossible, things that I haven't seen happen for years and years and years. And we went into this purely 4th dimensional space where its first coincidences started happening one after another, and the coincidences started going up into higher and higher levels until things started happening that were not possible, like people appearing and disappearing right in front of me and all kinds of stuff. And it went on for 3 days long. I can't do that story right now because I really need to talk about this other story. Maybe I'll be able to get to that one. But there's a little component in this story that was important. When I was there one of the things I had felt was that I needed to give Sananda and Jake and Katrina, that group, a copy of the Emerald Tablets. And I didn't have a copy, and the copy that I had was missing 2 or 3 pages. And so I felt like I really needed a whole one and get the missing pages. I needed one for myself, like a whole one. And I felt like I needed to send one to Nita, my sister, and to one to them. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I really need 3 copies of this. I had only thought that, not just a little bit before we had left. And so here we end up in Tucson, Arizona. And while I'm there, I happen to be in this person's house, and I mention the Emerald Tablets. I just say something about it. I don't know if it was to Sananda or who it was. I just mentioned it. And this person that was standing there turns around and says, "Emerald Tablets?" And I go, "Yeah, the Emerald Tablets." I says, "Have you ever heard of them?" And the person kind of brags and says, "Oh, I know the person who brought the emerald tablets out." And I kind of go, "Really? You do?" And he said, "Yeah." He says he knew all about them. He says they were interpreted back in the 20s, but there was a person who released them out, and her name is Angelique. And he says, "Would you like to meet her?" And I said, "Yeah, I really would." And so we immediately, goes and makes a phone call, comes back, and he says, "She would like to meet you right now." I said, "Okay." So we go jump in a car, we're over there, and like 20 minutes later, here we are walking into Angelique's house. And it's this old Victorian type house. And we go in there, and here's this big living room with this, kind of Victorian, kind of dark type thing with big plants, and it's a big living room. And in the far back end of the living room, this woman is sitting in this chair, kind of like this. So we have to walk across a fair amount of space to get over to the chair where, I guess this is Angelique. And as we get over to her, we get about halfway there, and she leans forward in her chair, and she starts scolding me. She says, "Where have you been?" And I go, "I don't know." She says, "I've been waiting for you for 6 months." And I go, "Well, I don't know. Here I am, And so I walk up to her, and she's this young, she's not real, she's about 35 years old. She's a little bit taller than me. And she looks at me, she reaches over onto this table, and here's 3 copies of the Emerald Tablet. And she picks them up and she says, "These are yours." Here I am with these 3 brand new copies of the Emerald Tablets. And my little mind is going, "Hey, this is just what I need." And she says, "I've been waiting." "I was told 6 months ago you were supposed to be here." And I said, "Who told you?" And she says, "My angel, who said that you were going to be here, and I thought you were going to be here a long time ago." And I says, "Well, I'm late, but here I am." And she says, "My angel told me that when you got here, I was to answer any question you wanted to know. So what do you want to know?" And so I says, "Well, I don't remember what I asked her, actually. I asked her a whole bunch of questions about it, and she just answered them, fired out the answers, every one of them. And the only thing I can really remember, was she said, one of the things I asked her, I got curious, and I said, "Well, how did you come by these tablets? How did they end up in your hands?" And she proceeded to tell me this story. She said that there was a man and a woman who went to the Yucatan a few years back. And when they they were married, and when they got to the Yucatan, they decided to go visit this temple. And they were walking through the jungle, and they got separated. And then they got lost. And the man made his way back, but the woman got totally lost, and she started meandering through the jungle, the Mayan jungle. If you've ever been in the Mayan jungle, it's really a trip. I decided to do that once. I meandered through the Mayan jungle for a while and see if I could get lost. But I didn't. I found a Mayan village instead. I didn't get lost. Hey, that's exactly what happened to her. Huh. Anyway, never thought about that before. Maybe all jungle trails lead to Mayan villages. I don't know. Never occurred to me on that level before. Anyway, she went back and she got lost for 3 days and 2 or 3 nights. I don't know how that worked out. She got lost in there and didn't know where she was. And on the 3rd day, she climbed up on this little hill where she could see around. And she looked down into this, and that's exactly what I was on, too. I was on this little hill looking down this little village down there below. And there was this Mayan village down there with these little, kind of these grass huts with these grass roof type thing, reed type things on the roofs. And she saw this village down there. And she said, aha, civilization, sort of. And decided to go down there. And she said, according to Angelique, she started to take a step. And let's see if I can remember this exact sequence here. I hope I can do this right. I can never remember if it was the left foot or the right foot first. Other than that, it'll be the right sequence. She put her right foot forward, and this big snake went right underneath her foot from left to right. And she jerked her foot back, which is normal. And she started to take a step with her left foot, and a snake went from right to left, right underneath her foot. And she pulled her foot back. And she started to take another step, and the snake went from left to right, directly underneath her foot, and she pulled her foot back. And when she looked, and she was watching the ground as she was doing this, and when she looked up, there was this huge butterfly fluttering right in her face. And the combination of these three snakes doing this and this butterfly doing this thing completely flipped her out, and she went running down this trail at full tilt, running down, screaming all the way, running into the village and into one of these grass huts and right into the arms of this Mayan chief, who was standing there wondering what happened, probably. And it was kind of dark in there, and there were a whole bunch of other Mayan men, because there was a Mayan circle that was happening at that very moment that was in there. And so she runs into his arms, and wham, and she's all hysterical. And they could both speak Spanish. And he says to her, you know, you're upset. What's wrong? I'm ad-libbing here, of course. What's wrong? And she starts going, well, the rattlesnake, the snake, this one, the butterfly. Ah! And it gets very quiet in this room. And all these old men stand up, and they all circle around this woman and look at her, because, you see, Durrell, who was a member of the White Brotherhood, was instructed to go to this particular village in 1925, because 2,000 years earlier, Thoth, when he was Hermes in Greece, had written the Emerald Tablets, only he created them through thought and alchemy. He made the Emerald Tablets, which were these 12 tablets with these golden rings, and he carried them to this tribe and gave them to this tribe and said, someone will come for them in the future, and gave them exactly who it was, Durrell, and all these signs that they would look for. So in 1925, Durrell comes in there, and they give him the tablets. He interprets all the tablets, takes 10 of them, puts them under his arm, and gives 2 of them back, which was his instructions to them. He then brought them to the halls of records underneath the Great Pyramid and placed them there. He wrote out an entire interpretation of the Emerald Tablets, and he then left with this Mayan tribe. He said, there will be a woman that will come to you in the future. You will know her by the 3 snakes and the butterfly. And when she comes, this is what you're to do with her. And so what they did was they picked her up, and they took her to this cave that was prepared for this, and brought her inside and gave her no food for 30 days, but only water, and instructed her in some kind of way which I did not understand. And this, of course, had a big impact on her. No. She does now, but she didn't then. She didn't know what was happening to her. All she knew is something was happening. It was all preordained. She was supposed to do this. She just didn't remember who she was. She hadn't had her memories back yet. kind of like some of you. She didn't quite have the memories back. And and so when they were all done with her, meanwhile, Durrell in 1925, we're going to go skipping over time here, took the translation and went to a young couple in New York City and gave them this translation and says, you are to keep a hold of this translation for the rest of your life. If anyone wants to see it, they can see it, but don't let them take it out of your possession and don't let them copy it or anything else like that. That was his instructions. So this young couple, when they were very young, 1925, they kept this emerald tablets, the interpretation. In the meanwhile, back on the other end, in more recent times, which would have been probably the late 70s, when this was occurring, the Mayans, after they got done with her, gave her an address of an apartment in New York City and told her, go there and get the interpretation. Get it at any cost. And then let her go and showed her how to get home. She went back to L.A. Okay, see, where were we? We were in... The woman had just divorced her husband, was heading to New York. Okay. So this woman arrived in New York City, and she went to this address that was on this piece of paper and knocked on the door. The thing is that she still was kind of, had the vibe of jungle on her. And when they saw the door, they took one look at her and slammed it and locked it up. And she went away and realized that she wasn't dumb. She realized her situation. She went back and cleaned up and put on a dress and new stuff and all this stuff like that, and went back and knocked on the door again. When they saw her the second time, they didn't know it was the same person. They had no idea. And they liked her. And they let her in, and she said that she knew that they had the emerald tablets. Could she see it? And they said, of course, but you can't copy it or photograph it or take it away or anything like that. And she said, that's okay, I just want to see it. And so she showed it to them. And then at one point, she said something like, can I have some coffee or something? And they went away, and when they got just a little bit away, she grabbed it and ran out the door. See, their instructions were to keep it and never let it go, but her instructions were to get it no matter what. And this is very much like the Great White Brotherhood and the Great Dark Brotherhood. They both, this is just a little interjection that I'll put in here. We tend to think that the dark side is trying to do everything to harm life and et cetera and all these kinds of things, but really, from a higher point of view, that's not how we see things too much. There is only God. That's it. And if you take a planet like Earth, you have the Dark Brotherhood, and they are doing everything they can to stop that planet from evolving. And the White Light Brotherhood is doing everything they can to make it evolve. And what's really going on is the two are working for God together. And they work together so that this planet does either go up or down, whichever is necessary, at the right moment. It happens precisely. It's timing, which is the factor here that's the most important thing. In other words, if something's going to happen, if you're going to plant a seed in the ground, you probably aren't going to want to plant it in the springtime. I mean, in the winter time. You're going to wait till the right moment to do that. You're going to wait till the right moment to water it, because timing is very important. And no matter what there is in life, timing is a very important function in it. Everything is a function of timing. And so these dark and light forces cause the timing of nature and life to move exactly at the right time. And so from that point of view, the two brotherhoods actually work together. They're not opposed, they actually work together. And there wouldn't be light without darkness, and there wouldn't be darkness without light. So anyway, that's exactly what happened there. One was told, don't let go of it, and the other one said, get it no matter what. And she got it, ran out the door, and was then instructed by her inner guidance to go to Globe, Arizona. And in Globe, Arizona, she was then instructed to go to Angelique and give her the copy. And that's how Angelique got this copy. Angelique then had this angel who told her in the beginning, when it first was released, who could have it, and only certain people could have it. And the angel would always tell them exactly who was going to have it and when. And so she had those 3 copies already waiting for me because she knew that I was going to be coming, except she expected me a lot earlier. And, okay, so now back to the other story.
What happened to the last 2 tabs?
The what?
Last 2 tabs.
They were kept in the Yucatan, and probably, I think, are still there. And why they've divided them in that way, I don't know. The last 2 interpretations of the tablets were not released originally. When Angelique got the thing, she only got all of them but those last 2. So the original ones that were released out to the world were just the first 10. However, once they were released out, then Durrell's Brotherhood, which is now, at this moment, I feel a very sense of distortion what's going on with that group. It is having problems. I mean, they're collecting guns and ammunition and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know what's going on with that group. But anyway, at one point they did, once they saw them out, they did release it. And at the right moment, they had the other 2 tablets. And then at the right moment, they released those 2. So they're all out now. You can get the whole thing.
Are they accurate, the ones
The interpretations themselves are pretty accurate according to Thoth. There are a few errors in there when he made the instructions. The actual Emerald tablets are pretty accurate. The interpretation that Durrell made while he was still alive about the Emerald tablets is riddled with mistakes, according to Thoth. It's all kinds of things. When he talks about, for example, that the ship that's underneath the Great Pyramid, this was done in 1925, and so he had to think how that ship was propelled, or try to interpret this word that talked about the propelling of it. And the most advanced thing he could think of was atomic motors. So he said the ship had atomic motors, but there's no motors on the ship. It was propelled by thought and by feeling, and that was more advanced than he couldn't conceive of that. That was inconceivable in 1925. So there are a lot of mistakes in there, but in the actual writings themselves, which is the only part that I'm really concerned with, they're relatively accurate. They're pretty good. So anyway, so now we took these 3 copies and I went back home. And I gave one to Sananda, I gave one to my sister, and I kept one myself. And it was soon after that we were ready to go, and we got all everything together. We got on this free TWA flight, and we flew to Egypt, coming down, floating over the top of the 3 pyramids. It was really neat how they did that. They circled around them and then like that. And we landed. We were met by Ahmed Fahed. Anybody know Ahmed? A couple people. Ahmed Fahed is very famous in Egypt. He works for the government. He is the highest Egyptian archaeologist in the Egyptian government. He is over every single other Egyptian archaeologist, except for one, his father, and who doesn't work for the government anymore, but they still respect him. The way that he got to where he is at is because of his dad. And his dad is, I need to tell the story about his dad because it's a true story, and it's hard to, and it's well known in the archives of Egyptian history, and yet it's so fantastic from over here that it's hard for us to believe it. But when his dad was 12 years old, his name is Muhammad Fahed. When Muhammad was 12 years old, he had a dream. He had a dream that there was a wooden boat beside the Great Pyramid. And this boat was 120 feet long and so many feet wide, and he drew a drawing of this boat, and which was like a photograph of this boat. And he told the Egyptian, in the dream it said that the boat was so many feet over to, I think it was the west side or east side, I can't remember. One of the sides over there, and it was so many feet down. Well, because the picture was so real and the hieroglyphics were real and everything else like that, the government decided to look and see. This was a long, long, long time ago. You know, Muhammad is probably maybe 80 years old or older, I don't know, but he's pretty old. All he does now is sit around and play backgammon. That's about it. That's all I ever saw him do anyway. And so they drill a hole down there, and sure enough, there was a room there, and there was something in it. And they went down in there and got it out, and it was all these pieces of wood and stuff and things that looked like it could be a boat, but they couldn't figure out how it was. And so the Egyptian government tried for 2 years to put these pieces together, and basically gave up. So now the kid's 14 years old, and he has another dream, which is the blueprint for the boat. Exactly how to do it. You put A with B and move it over to C and turn a screw. And they did exactly what the blueprint said, and this beautiful boat comes together perfectly, just like they said. So since it was made out of wood, they built this big, fantastic, modernistic room, which I guess is on the south side. Is that where it is? I think it's on the south side. And put the boat inside there, and it's still there. You can go see it now. It's still sitting there. They had to enclose it in a what do you call it? Temperature controlled room. Okay, that's good. There's another room for it, an environmentally controlled room, so the wood doesn't deteriorate. They and then he had another dream and said that there was another one on the other side. So they drilled down there, and sure enough, there's another boat down there. But they decided that they weren't going to build another one of those fancy rooms, so they filled the hole up. So it's still sitting down there inside, and they're just not even going to touch it. After that, the government listened to him whenever he had anything to say. And when he got a little older, Muhammad went out into a desert where there was nothing. It was north of Saqqara. There was nothing there. It was just desert and a few little houses spread around. And he said to them, under here is one of the oldest cities in all of Egypt. If he had not done what he had done before with the boat, no one would have listened to him, and no one would have spent the money to remove the amount of earth that was necessary to get to this place. But because he had done that, they listened to him. And so what he did is he started with one place, and he went over to this spot, like this room, and he says, he would draw a little line, put a little stick, and say, right here is the corner of this building, and he'd show him a drawing. There'd be a drawing in the corner, and he said, this is this corner of the building. It's right there, and it's so many feet down. And he'd remove the earth, and there would be the exact building, exactly like the picture, exactly so many feet down, just like he said. No errors at all, as far as I understand. And then he would say, over here goes the causeway, and over here's the other buildings, and over here's this, and over here's that. And they slowly unfolded. And this place is now known as Memphis. And almost everything in Memphis was exposed and brought to the surface by this one man, Muhammad. And he kept doing this all over Egypt. He'd just go around and say, over here's this, over here's this. You'll find this in there. And Muhammad knows really, I know what some of the things that Muhammad knows because I've been told, but he won't ever release them. He'll go to his grave with them. But there are things that he knows that if we knew, it would be just truly, truly, truly amazing. Anyway, when we wanted to get into the middle pyramid, that was closed, I believe, until the 1950s or somewhere around there. We had no way of knowing how to get inside there. Again, there's over 2.5, it's about 2.5 million blocks in that pyramid. And each one is, huge and weighs a lot. And the Egyptian government went to him at one point and said, can we get inside the middle pyramid? We would like to go in there, please. And so Muhammad prayed and came back and said, yes, you can go inside. And so they said to him, we will remove one block. That's it. Only one. So he had to hit a home run on the first pitch. And he sat down in front of the north face for 5 hours and meditated. And then he said, that one. And they went up to that one and carefully took it out and removed it. And that was the exact doorway into the second pyramid. And that's how they got in there. So his whole life is, that's why he's secretly famous in Egypt. And Ahmed Fayed is his son. That's how his son got the reputation that he got. So his son, if a king or a queen comes to Egypt and needs to be taken around, it's Ahmed who does it. This kind of thing. And Ahmed happens to be very close friends of my sister Nita. They're really, really good friends. And he would come and spend many months at my sister's house, and she would go over there and spend months at his house. And they've been friends for a long time. And so that's who met us. And here we are, this little band of 5. And they come in and they just, we didn't even go through customs. He just took us around. He takes the stamp out of the guy's hand, goes stamp, 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 gives it back to him. We walk in, just go walk by everybody, just walk right on the street and get in a car and drive right to his house. They didn't even look in our bags and didn't even say hello to us, didn't even talk to us. We just walked by everybody. Nobody said a word. Went straight to his house. His house is a 4-story, like an apartment building, which is his house, that looks straight into the Sphinx. And so he gave us one of the floors of this apartment building to stay in. And that evening, let me see, I got to think about this one. When we got in there, it was after, I wanted to start in Luxor, and the train, there's a French train that goes to Luxor, about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and we got there where I couldn't go. I couldn't go on that train that day, and I would have to go, I'd have to wait an entire day till the next evening before I could go to Luxor. So when we got there, Ahmed said, well, he says to my sister, well, what do you want me to do? And she says, well, whatever he wants to do, whatever my name then was Akbar. I was in Sufism for years and years. My name was Akbar Ali Khan. And she says, whatever Akbar wants. And I said, well, here's the itinerary that I want to go on. And he looks all over the itinerary, and he says, well, and this is the itinerary that I've got to go exactly according to this itinerary. And Ahmed looks at it and says, well, he says, this isn't any good. You don't want to do this. He says, the train to go to Luxor won't be here until tomorrow evening. You're only going to be here for 9 or 10 days, whatever we're going to be there. He says, he's trying to talk me out of it. He says that we're going to be sitting around all day tomorrow, nothing to do. He says, let's change the itinerary around, and let's go to Saqqara tomorrow, and we'll go to the Sphinx and to the Great Pyramid, and we'll do all that stuff tomorrow while we're just sitting here, and then we'll go to Luxor tomorrow evening. I mean, it is logical. It's a logical thing to do. And I'm sitting there saying to him, no, I don't really want to do that. Let's just start in Luxor. And he's going, no, I really insist that we do it this way. And he keeps going on, and finally I realized I was hitting a brick wall here. And I finally just said, well, okay, we'll go. We'll go to the Great Pyramid tomorrow. And that made him happy. And I was wondering what was going to happen. I knew that it couldn't happen. And so he wanted to leave early in the next morning and go straight into the tunnel next morning, which, by the way, he did everything he could to talk us out of doing that. Like I said, many, many, many people have been hurt down there real bad. He says, I'll go all over Egypt with you. He says, I'm not going down there. You guys are crazy. If you want to go down there, you can do it, but I don't suggest you do it. And he wanted to know why we ever would want to go down there. He says, that's a dumb place to go down. He was doing everything. This guy was doing everything he could to try to talk us out of what we wanted to do. So, as it turned out, he wanted to take us straight in the tunnel. And so the next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, we're in Ahmed's house, which I think is up either on the third, no, that was where it goes. I think it was on the second floor. In Ahmed's house, he's got, it's like an apartment building, and then he's got his own, like a major suite in this building where he lives. And so Sananda was there, my sister, Jake, myself, and Katrina. And we had our little backpacks on with water and candles and flashlights. Thoth didn't want me to use a flashlight. He said I get one when I get in there, but not to use one once I get in there to use a candle. And a light jacket and these kind of things. And so here we are, all ready to go. And I'm going, wow, I can't believe this is happening. If I go over there, it's all over with. This is it. And yet, here I am. We're walking out the door. He opens the door. Let's go. I'm going, I'm walking out the door. I'm really doing this. And Katrina walks out. Sananda walks out. Jake walks out. They all walk out, and I'm the last one, and I pick up my pack, and I'm walking toward the door. I'm only about 4 feet away from the door, and suddenly something happens to me that I've never experienced before in my whole life. I was absolutely healthy, totally fine. I walked toward to the door, and suddenly this wave of energy comes over me, and it stopped me in my tracks. And I just stopped. And then a second or two later, another wave came over me. And then another one. And all of a sudden, I realized that all my systems were breaking down extremely rapidly. And within a minute or two, or it just seemed like seconds, really, I collapsed onto the ground, and I felt like I was dying. It happened so fast that I couldn't, my little spirit that was inside here couldn't cope with it. It was like my body was getting sick, but my little spirit was too quick. It takes time to get sick. You got to go through stages here. I'm getting sick. I got a headache. I'm doing this thing like that. Something like that. This is like, boom. And I'm sitting there going, everything I was starting to throw up. Everything was happening, and yet I'm sitting here inside the body going, this can't be. It was too quick to feel pain or anything. It was just like my body was just going crazy. And within 15 minutes, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. They carried me into this bed, laid me in this bed, and I was just like, I couldn't move anything. I could barely even open my eyes. I was so weak that I could hardly move at all. I mean, I don't even know if I could move. Nothing. I was just saying I couldn't move. And I was getting sicker and sicker and weaker by the minute. A little while later, I'm like kind of down inside my body. I'm going, holy cow, I got to do something here. This is serious stuff. And I'm thinking, well, I need to get my breathing going. It's like my breathing was stopped. My flow was stopped. And I've got to get my breathing going. And that's when I realized, I don't know how to do the breathing laying on my side. That's why I was laying all like that. And I was like, I'm always used to sitting up straight, and I'm feeling this way. And I was going, I couldn't figure out how to do it. I tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't figure out how to get it going laying on my side. This is why, because of that experience, after that, I went and started practicing how to do it in any conceivable way you can think of, I was thinking, well, I might be in a snowstorm or in an avalanche, and I end up upside down. I got to learn how to do this any old way, So I was practicing all these different things. And so time went by, and I finally realized that I couldn't do it. I absolutely couldn't. I didn't know how. And after about 4 hours or something went by, and it was getting toward the afternoon, and everybody's just sort of standing around watching me, and they didn't know what to do either. I called Sananda and Katrina in, and I was laying there, and I could barely talk, and I was just saying, you gotta prop me up. You gotta do it. And so they pulled me up into position, and I was just like a rubber man. They propped me, got my back straight, and everything else like that. And it took all the energy I had to roll my hands over and get my mudras in place and everything else like this. And I slowly started this breathing going. And it didn't take very long. It started moving. I felt the flow come back in, and I started getting into the rhythm, and I started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And after about a period of time, and I really couldn't say, it might have been a half an hour or something, I really don't know, 45 minutes, I don't know, something like that. I started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I could hold myself up. I still felt terrible, but I could sit up. And I just kept the flow going and kept it going, and within at least, I think it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was back to just about normal. And I was walking around the room. And I felt like I'd just been, like my brains had just been vacuumed out or something. I was pretty empty feeling. But I was walking around and feeling pretty good and much, much better. And Ahmed walks in the room. He had been gone for several hours, and he didn't see me go through this. Last he saw me, I was on the bed like this. He comes back in, and I'm standing up. And he walks over to me, and he goes, hey, you're looking pretty good. I go, yeah, I'm looking, I don't feel great, but I look bad. And he talks to me for a while, and he goes, well, he pulls out the paper I'd given him. He pulls it out. He looks at it for a moment, and he goes, what, do you think you could travel? And I go, yeah, I guess so. He goes, well, that French train leaves in, I guess it's about an hour and something like that. We can go down and get on. We can go right back to this old itinerary that you want to do in the first place if you want to. We could leave here at 6 o'clock. I go, all right. And I still don't know today if I made myself sick to happen to do that or if Thoth did it. I'm sure it was all planned on one level out there. I don't know. But what a heck of a way to have to go through just to make something happen like that. But we ended up on this train. We ended up in Luxor. And by the time we got to Luxor, I was just about back to normal. There wasn't hardly any, kind of a little bit, but not much. All within 24 hours. Less than 24 hours. It was still the same day. And so everything after that happened exactly as it was planned. It was perfect. There was no hindrance. There was no nothing. Everything moved like this clock. We went to each temple. We went to the place. We did the ceremonies. And I had all my Atlantean words written out in a sequence with each temple. So I'd get to the temple and I'd read the words out and everything else like that. And we'd do all those various things. We went through all the various places. And finally, we got them all completed, and we ended up back at Ahmed's house on January 17th, 1985. It's just the way it worked out, so that on January 18th of 1985, on that early morning, we were going to go in and do the final initiation, which is what we came there for. That was an interesting date, January 18th, because it happened to be my birthday of this body. And I didn't plan it. It's just the way it worked out. It's also the way it worked out the second time I went. I went between January 10th, January 19th, and ended up in the pyramid doing another initiation on January 18th, and I didn't plan that. I had nothing to do with it. It's just the way it worked out. And so anyway, on that morning, I guess we're getting to the place where we need to actually make this check. Yeah, let's stop right here. Okay. Where were we? We're going into... about to go... Got back, birthday, about to go into the Great Pyramid, right? Okay. Okay, so on January 18th, we, for real this time, we were going to go into the Great Pyramid. And early in the morning, we did the same thing all over again. We all got ready, got our little backpacks and all that other stuff, and we walked toward the door. And I went, oh boy, but nothing happened. And I made it through the door, and we went on down, and he took us into the pyramid. Usually when you want to go into some place where you're not supposed to go, you just pay somebody some money, and they just look the other way, and you go in there. But since this one had just had a lot of problems, and they were really serious about this one at that moment, Ahmed actually had to go get a letter from the government. We had legal Egyptian government permission to go down in there. I mean, they were really serious about this one right then. And he said that they would give us 1 hour and 30 minutes exactly. That's it. They would let us in, hit the stopwatch. We better be back because they're only going to open the door just long enough to let us out and click us back in. What they did is you have 18,000 people a day goes into the Great Pyramid, and it's like this cattle going in and out constantly, just the hordes. And what they did is they brought us in with the hordes, and then they blocked it off. This person blocks off the people, blocks them off in the other one around the edges so they couldn't see us, opens up the iron gate, lets us in. Hour and 30 minutes. Be here. And as soon as we got out of sight, they let him go again. They didn't want anybody to even see that we were going in there. And so here we are, all cuddled down in there, not knowing what to expect. we were sitting in this little platform thing where it goes, before this place that goes down in there. Just so you can see this, you're sitting in this long tunnel. It goes down, and we're up here, and it goes down. It's at 23 degrees, which is the slope of the Earth. It's sitting right at the slope of the Earth. And it goes down to this little room. I'm doing this from an aerial view now, though. This is how the slope goes to a little room, goes through a little thing, and then there's this big room over here like that. And the tunnel comes off over here. This is an aerial view of this. One thing that Thoth told me when we were back, he said, that room that we're going into, I got two different views there. I got one view coming down and an aerial view with a room thing. He said that this room, called the well down at the bottom underneath the pyramid, he says, that wasn't made. He said, I didn't do that. He says, you didn't make that room? He says, nope, it was there before. He says, that's one of the reasons why I put it there, was because that was one of the openings into the halls of Amente, and they wanted that's how he got in every 50 years, and he wanted to hide that opening. He wanted to secure it. And and he didn't mind if I did this, but every time he told something to me like that, that's not in any of the books or anything, I'd always try to check it to see if it was true. And there was a lot. I checked up on him, and I don't know how many things. I was always doing it, checking up to see if what he told me was really true. I never found a single error, and that was a real glaring one. You mean, because most of the books tell you that the whole thing was built. I've never read anywhere that room was not part of the pyramid. And so that was one of the first things I asked Ahmed. I said, just real casually, I kind of said, hey, you know that room down there? I said, do you think, I said something, I said, that was all built, I don't know what exactly how I said it, but I said, that was all built with the Egyptians built that or something like that when they, And he looked at me, he says, no, he says, that room wasn't built by the Egyptians. I said, well, how do you know that? He says, well, he says they built everything else. He says they built the tunnel leading down to it. He says they built the room in it. They built the thing coming into it, and they also built the well in the middle. That they know. He says, but the rest of the room is much older than the Great Pyramid, and they don't know who did it. I was going, no kidding. It was that was one of the things that really convinced me that this guy Thoth was pretty good. Anyway, so we were faced with trying to go down this long tunnel. The thing is this tunnel isn't very wide. It's only maybe this wide, but it's only about maybe that high. It was, it was so short. I don't know exactly, but we were sitting up there trying to figure out how to get down it because there's no steps. It's just smooth. And so we're thinking, well, we'll slide down this thing. No, it's 100. What is it? What's that? 400 feet. 400 feet down this thing. I remember it took a long time. We go, well, we'll slide down. We go, no. And then we're going, well, let's see. It's really hard trying to figure out. So we finally said, well, and so the Nanda says, I know. We'll get the ball and roll down it. I go, you go first. And it really did. We must have spent about 4 or 5 minutes trying to figure out how we're going to even maneuver this. And we finally had to take our backpacks off, put them underneath like this, and walk like ducks. So we got down like this, and we walk like a duck. And I'll tell you use muscles you never knew that you had. Walking down at 23 degrees like that. And even then it was a little tight. And so everybody went first and I was last. And they're all going down there and I'm walking down there like a duck and I'm not even thinking. Totally blank mind. I'm just doing this thing. I wasn't excited. I wasn't I was somewhat detached. I was just walking down this tunnel doing my job. And all of a sudden, I got somewhere down here. I don't know where I was. Somewhere about here, I have to guess. And this thing happened. I suddenly went through, and I was tuning what I was feeling. I remember now there was one thing that was going on. There's a vibration that moves through the Great Pyramid. Anyone that's ever been there will know what I'm talking about. It's almost audible. It's a feeling. It's like a sound. It's like this vibration. You can feel it. And it's real male and very deep. And it's kind of a sound. It's a vibration about like this. I gotta kind of tune to it. It's kind of this sound that's real low, and it just keeps going all the time. And it's not like you hear it, you feel it. And I was kind of tuning to that feeling as I was going down there, and suddenly, all of a sudden, I felt it drop about 1 octave, and it went, oh. It went like that, and at the same time, all the hair in my arms and the back of my neck and everything else went, and I just, it just made a chill go over my whole body. And suddenly, I felt fear. It's like I don't feel fear hardly ever, but I felt fear. And I didn't even know what I was afraid of. I just felt fear. And it's like it just stopped me in my tracks. And I stopped. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to do anything. I just felt really afraid about something. And I kind of looked around, and I looked over here to my left, and there was an embossed stone in the side of the wall. This is about actual size. It was a red square with a little square inside of it, and there was one on either side of me. And it was right where I was. And I looked at that, and I looked at that, and I kind of felt like I was in one of those laser beam things going between there. And I started to proceed further, but now I had this funny feeling all over my body that I couldn't stop. And I just started going down. And I got down a little ways, and my little mind is racing along. I wonder why I'm afraid. And I remember this conversation started going on in my head, saying, I said to myself, oh, come on, Drunvalo, you're not afraid of anything. And this other little side of me says, yes, you are. I go, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And he says, you're afraid of spiders. And I'm going, well, kind of, but I'm not really afraid of spiders. And I'm walking down there a little bit further, and he says, but I know you're afraid of rattlesnakes. And I go, yeah, I'm afraid of rattlesnakes, I guess. And then the image of rattlesnakes wouldn't get out of my mind. I'm going down further, I'm looking around for rattlesnakes, and it's like I'm going down a little bit further, and I hit somewhere about here, and all of a sudden the sound goes, that was already low, went, I'd stop again, shine my light over the side, and here's 2 more of these red squares on either side. And that really scared me then, because I realized that it wasn't just a coincidence. And I was totally shook up. And I just kept going down further. I had forgotten 100% and completely until about a week later, all my training on fear. The fear had scared the training out of me. I forgot that all I had to do was this thing with his rings, and I could find out if it was paranoia and all this stuff like that. Forget it. I totally forgot all that stuff. And I went through, I think, 3 or 4 sets of these things before I got to the bottom. Each time I just kept getting more and more freaked out. And this whole thing with rattlesnakes kept getting stronger and stronger, and snakes. And the time I got down at the bottom down there, I was so grateful to be in that little room down there, because it was kind of a little bit bigger room and stuff, and I could see around, and there was no snakes. And then we went into this other room, which is not that big. I don't know what it is. I guess the whole room, it's been a long time since I've been there. I don't think the whole room is any bigger than this side room over here, which is 30 feet by 30 feet or something like that. Would you say that's about how big it is?
I'd say it's
Smaller
smaller.
than that? 20 by 20? 24 by 24? Oh, that's 24 by 20. It's 24 inches, 24 feet, 7 inches. I don't remember. But it was a lot bigger than this little room. This, by the way, this little room is right in here that you come into before you go in there. That's not in any of the writings or diagrams or anything. In fact, even the supposedly the exact copy that's in the Rosicrucian main temple in California, which supposedly has an exact copy of the whole thing in there, it doesn't have that little room in there. But that room is there, because I went through it. It's a totally perfect little, obviously Egyptian-made, perfect little, kind of a little, what's the ante-chamber kind of thing that you go into, and then it goes into this big room. And then in the big room, or bigger room, you walk into a totally female space. Other than the well that's in the middle of it, which the Egyptians made, and which used to go all the way down to the Nile, but it's filled with debris, maybe 20 feet down or so like that, or maybe a little further. But the rest of the room doesn't have a straight line that I could see anywhere, a straight line or a crevice anywhere. It's all curving spaces. And it's a very funny looking room. It's a sloping roof. It's all black on top. Looks like fires have been burnt. And it goes down, it goes into the back, and there's these funny looking bumpy things over the side and all this kind of stuff. And you kind of go, wow, this is weird. This is not normal stuff here. And so we went into the bigger room, and we looked for the tunnel, which was on the far back wall against the far left-hand side down against the floor, which is a totally asymmetrical place of view. It's nothing like the Egyptians would do. They would make it in the center of the wall or something like that. And it was placed over in this place. And that tunnel is even smaller. I would say that it's about this wide and about that high. And it goes back in there somewhere about 80 to 100 feet, if I remember right. It goes back into the wall. And it's covered with crystals on 3 sides. Did you remember that? The little room that you went into?
Said it, I did.
When I said it, you did?
I forgot all about it.
Huh. Well, you went back in there farther than you think, I think. Or
It seems like an awful long way.
either that or they, if you said you only went 25 feet in there, it was definitely not 25 feet. Maybe they did block it off and left part of it. That would be the wisest thing they could do, because nobody would ever know then. And because all they need to do is just get the end of the tunnel. It's only the last 2 feet of the tunnel that has any power. The rest of it's nothing. And so anyway, it has crystals on 3 sides and has like silicon sand on the bottom. And when you shine a light in it, the light does this weird thing. It spirals down, if you notice that. the crystals light up in these spirals, like a rifle barrel, going like that. And it goes about 10 feet and stops in a black wall. It's like you can't make the light, no matter how bright it is, go any further. It's weird. And so we all went and looked in that thing, and I looked in it, and Sananda looked in it, and Katrina looked in it, and Jake looked in it, my sister looked in it, and they all backed away. They all turned around and looked at me and said, "You got us in here, you go in first." And so I tried to crawl in it, but I couldn't even put my backpack on. It was so small. And so I finally got in here, this little thing, like the old military thing, got down on hands and knees and crawled in like this, and just started crawling and crawling and crawling and crawling. Meanwhile, I got my little flashlight on, and as I start crawling in here, the whole thing with snakes starts coming back again. I'm first. And I'm looking around for snakes, and I didn't see any, and spiders or anything else, and it didn't look like anybody had been in there for a long time. And I kept crawling and 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 crawling. And I finally came to the end of this tunnel. And I could see it, and it just looked like they were digging, and they just stopped. And I came up to the place, and I saw that there was no snakes or spiders or anything in it. And this big wave of, whew, I'm safe, kind of feeling came over me. And I crawled up to the end. I put my little backpack down. I started to try to turn around or do something, and I looked down, and here's the end of the tunnel. And in the far right-hand end of the tunnel, and slightly up high, is a hole about that big around that kind of goes back in. And I remember getting down with my little eye, with my flashlight, looking in that little hole, and I'm thinking, that sure does look like a snake hole. I looked down in there to see if anybody's looking back, but they didn't. There's nobody in there. And so I'm sitting here like this, facing the wall, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do what the hieroglyphics said I was supposed to do. The hieroglyphics, which I saw, shows it shows this room like this, and here's the tunnel, it goes nowhere like that, and it shows Osiris sitting there, with his knees up like this, facing this way, and then all these other people this is a hieroglyphic, and I knew when I saw it exactly what it was. And it shows Osiris facing this way and all these other people facing this way. And what it was is that Osiris would come in there, and he would sit, they must have been little, they'd sit in this tunnel like this, and then he would line his head up until that beam went right through the head, and then he would take them all on a trip into the halls of Amenti. And so I realized when I was facing the wall, I said, no way, man. I can't sit like that. It would go right through about here. And so I called Thoth in. He was right present. I says, what do I do? And he said, lay down on your back with your head facing up, head to foot, head to foot, head to foot, all the way down. So I gave him those instructions, and I said, head to foot. So I turned around and laid down with the wall to my back. And I put my backpack down, and I took the little candle out and lit the candle, and we all had to put our lights out, and we all kind of settled down. I pulled my little piece of paper out that had all the names I was supposed to, and sounds I was supposed to make, and laid down. And then Thoth came in and he said, okay, now repeat the words you're supposed to do. And what I was doing was calling forth the 7 lords that were the protectors of the halls of Amenti, and asking for their permission that we could enter into this space. And he wanted me to do it with force, so I had to be kind of dramatic. I don't know why, but he wanted me to do that. So I did it with force and said all my words and did the whole thing, put the paper away, and he said, blow out the candle. So I blew out the candle. A whole series of things happened very, very quickly after that. first one was, I realized that I was now sitting in the darkest place on the planet, I think. I couldn't believe how dark this place was. I even put my hand up like this, and it was like I didn't even have a hand. It's like I couldn't even feel it, I couldn't even sense it. It was the darkest, thickest black. I mean, it was like nothing. Put my hand back down. And the next thing that hit me was, hey, this is just like being buried alive. There's no way that way, there's no way this way, there's no way that way, there's no way this way, there's no way that way. And that one's clogged up with bodies. that feeling, but I'm not claustrophobic, so it wasn't a real problem, but I was thinking, boy, if you were claustrophobic, this could be a big problem. And then the next thing was I felt this intense gravitational weight. I mean, there's a mountain on top of me, a huge mountain, and I could feel this. It felt great, actually. That part of it, all those things felt fine. I had no problem with it. And so I settled down to go into meditation, and I didn't make any difference whether I closed my eyes or opened my eyes. It was the same thing. There's no difference at all. And so I closed my eyes anyway, and I settled down to go into meditation. Only my little mind is going, hey, Drunvalo, you remember that little hole? It's right behind your head. And there's nowhere to go. And so I was like, I was really going through it. I was trying to get out of it, and my mind kept going through it, and the fear kept coming over me, and I started feeling weird again, and all that stuff started coming back. And I was saying, this is crazy. You know, this isn't real. There's no real in here. But then I'd still feel the feeling. And finally, and completely forgetting all my training, never even occurred to me, not even once. I don't think it occurred to me until I got back to the United States, actually. And I finally, I did what I call the John Wayne act. I said to her, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I just grabbed myself by the shirt. I said, look. You have come all the way across this ocean, all this way to come across here. Who cares if you die? No one's going to miss you. I was saying all these kind of things, all this stuff. Doesn't make any difference. You came here. This is really important. You got to do it. So do it. And it worked. It worked for me. I don't know how it worked, but it worked. And I finally relaxed. And the other thing I did simultaneously, I called in Thoth and said, please, give me something to do. And he said, get into your Merkaba, begin your meditation, and begin the breathing. And I did it laying down, which I couldn't have done a week earlier. I did it, and I didn't even think about it. I just did it. Didn't even occur to me. It seemed totally normal in there. Maybe because there was no up or down or anything. It was just felt like it felt like you're floating in space in this place. So I created the Merkaba, got this field spinning, and the disc pops out, and the flying saucer shape appeared around me. And I sat back, and I then said, okay, what's next? What do you want me to do? I think we need a time check here. Okay, I think maybe we can do it. So I created the disc, and I asked Thoth, what do you want me to do? And he said, remember when this is sort of an ad lib about what he told me. He says, remember when you're breathing like this way, he says, you are radiating light out beyond you're going to understand this later when we make this, but there's a tube that runs through your body, and it radiates out into this big sphere around your body. And he said, He says, when you're doing that, he says, do you realize that you are actually radiating light beyond your sphere out into the room? And I had that training, and I said, yes, I understand. And he stops for me and he says, no. Do you really understand that you are radiating light into the space around you? And again, I said, yeah, I understand I am. And he says, no. Do you really understand? And I said, well, I think so. And he said, open your eyes. And so I'm laying on my back, and I open my eyes, and the tunnel is lit up. I could see the surface clearly above me. And it was not like a flashlight or daylight or anything else like that. It was a soft, like a moonlight glow all over. And it wasn't coming from any particular place. It was simply lit up. And then I thought, oh, it's somebody with a flashlight. And I remember looking down the tunnel, but those guys were just totally there was no lights, there was no nothing. And it was coming from all over my body. And I couldn't believe it. But I had to believe it because it was happening. And so I watched it. I closed my eyes, and I said to Thoth, I said, wow, something like that was amazing. And he says, look again. And so I opened my eyes again. It was still there. It was still real. And a little while later, I closed my eyes again. And I remember saying to him, okay, what do we do now? What's the next thing? Something like that. What else do we do? Or what's next? And he looks at me and he says, isn't lighting up a tunnel enough? And I said, yeah, I think so. After he told me that there wasn't anything to do, he told me to go, but to light up the tunnel, he said, just light up the tunnel. And so for the next maybe hour or so, or hour and 10 minutes, about every 5 minutes I'd open my eyes and look around, and totally lit up completely. I could see every tiny detail. I could see everything. I could read by it. It was bright enough to read by. Looked around, saw it, closed my eyes for a while. There wasn't anything to do. That's all he wanted me to do. That was it. And I did that for about an hour and 10 minutes. And I remember I had my little digital watch set here to come off at exactly this time and the amount of time that we figured, because we had to be back at this exact minute. And I'm sitting there, and the tunnel was lit up. I closed my eyes, and I was sitting there, and my eyes were closed when the watch went off. And I hit the button and opened my eyes, and it was pitch black. It was a funny feeling because I expected to see it. It was like nothing. And so I found my flashlight, and we managed to turn around and get out of there. And we silently went out and then went up to the top. We were there exactly on time. They stopped the people, opened the gates, and let us out. There were 5 of us. My sister had been there so many times that she didn't want to go to the King's Chamber, and she went straight out. And the 4 of us turned and went up into the King's Chamber, at which point it was over. We were tourists, and we went up in there and saw the King's Chamber and all that stuff like that. And when I came back down, this phenomena occurred that was truly remarkable. We had gone in there at 7 or 7:30 or 8. I don't know what the actual time that we finally actually went in there. And when we went in, there was just a few people around that were coming in. You know, it wasn't like most people get there about 9 o'clock on, and there were still people coming in, but it wasn't millions of them at that time. And when we came out, or by the time we came out, there was really lots of people coming through there. But when we stepped outside, when you step out into the daylight, you're way up high on the pyramid. I think it's about the 1/3 level or so where the doorway is. You're way up there, and you're looking down over this whole thing. And the sight that I was opened up to was thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of children It was a sea of children. I don't know how many people were out there, but I'd say 50, 60, 70,000 or more children was out there. It was just like a sea. It was like a football stadium of children. And I looked carefully at them, and they were all seemingly from about 5 years old to about 12 years old. And there was just lots of them. And my sister, too, when she went out there, she couldn't believe it either. She said she'd never seen anything like it. And that was the first thing that hit me. And then I had to go down these steps. And as I was getting almost down to the bottom where you're down where the children were, I noticed that on the very bottom step of the pyramid, there were children holding hands in a row all the way as far as I can see on this entire side of the pyramid. And so I walked down onto the stones part right above them because there was too many to go through these kids to get around to the other side. And once you got around the other side, it started to thin out. There was still a lot of kids, but it was thinning out. And they were ringed all the way around that side, holding hands. I finally got out into the place where I could walk out there, and I went down and I walked around the whole pyramid to see for my own eyes if it was true, and it was. These children had been ringing the pyramid while we were in there. Kids from 5 to 12 years old were holding hands. I don't know if they were in there the whole time we were in there, but when we got out, they were. I then started to go over to, I was wondering about this, and I started to go to Ahmed's house, and I look over, and they're ringing the middle pyramid. I wanted to see this for my own eyes. I went around the whole middle pyramid, and they had rung that one. And they had also been all the way around the third pyramid. All three pyramids were completely surrounded by children, which would take a lot of kids just to do that. If nothing else, just to do that. And I saw this with my own eyes. And at that point, I went back to Ahmed's house, and I went up into my little room up there. And I just sat there thinking, this is significant. I don't know what this means, but this is significant. And finally, at one point, I called in the angels, and I said, what does this mean? And they said to me, don't you remember what we told you 12 years ago? I said, no, I don't remember. And they said, you see, they had asked me to have this baby who they said was coming from the central sun. And they told me that he would be the apex of an entire pyramid of children that would come onto the earth. And that these children would be very, very, very highly advanced beings from higher dimensional levels that were coming here out of compassion and love to raise the vibration of the earth to help us to get over and through this time that we were coming into. And they said that these children would be absolutely normal kids. They'd go out and play baseball and fishing and everything else and frogs in their pockets, and there wouldn't be any difference at all until this one until 12 years had gone by, or in other words, his 13th birthday. I had completely forgotten about that. That was a long, long, long time ago. It had been 12 years before when they had said this. And then it struck me. Well, Zachary was born, and that's immediately I started counting this whole thing. Zachary was born, he was this child, on January 10th, 1972. And I'm sitting in this pyramid on January 18th, 1985.